Hello, Mr. Armstrong. This is McKenna and I's timeline, and we did Martin Luther because why not? So, before I begin, I also want to tell you that some of these words I might not be pronouncing correctly, so please don't judge me for that. And I also am referring to my notes that I took extensively because there aren't any words on our timeline part. So, if I glance over to the left, that's where all my information is. So, I just had to let you know. I'm not reading off anything. I swear. Pinky promise, okay? So, wait, let's begin. So, basically our main theme, thesis, overall topic is that Martin Luther is one of the most influential people of the 15 and 1600s because he was the first to question the authority of a higher power, a government or a church, or at this time, it was basically the same thing. And he created a massive impact. There were other people at the time that were questioning, but Martin Luther really got it going and he set it off. So this is our timeline. Basically, we started with Martin Luther's education and then the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, followed by the counterattack, his New Testament that was to the people, and then the Bible that was worldwide. And then our impacts are how the church started to branch off and split. And then the word was spread, and then also scientific revolution, that. And then there was also a war. So each picture or quote will be identified within its slide in the timeline. So don't worry. I know you're looking at that lightning bolt right now. What does that have to do with his education? How could that be related? So basically, Martin Luther was born in Aislinn, Saxony, which is now Germany, which is not really important, but because then he moved to Mansfield, and his father was a prosperous, very, very successful businessman because he had 10 children and was still able to put Luther into schooling at 5 years old. At this school, he learned how to read and write and also learn Latin. And then at 13 years old, he started going to a school run by the Brethren of the Common Life, which their teaching focused on personal piety. So they believed in the basic beliefs of Christianity and the divinity of Christ, which is just simple devotion to Jesus, and it emphasized peace and simplicity. So this is where Luther was really interested and started to become intrigued by monostatic life. I don't know if that was pronounced right, but he was, sparked that with the idea of being solely devoted to the church. But then his dad pulled him out of that school and wanted him to become a lawyer. So he enrolled him into the University of Erfurt, which was the top premier, you want to go there type of school at the time. So there he studied arithmetic, astronomy, geometry, and philosophy, and in 1505 he got a master's degree. Then, this is where it gets important. In July of the same year, he was caught in a violent, deadly, super scary thunderstorm, and he almost got struck by lightning and took his survival as a sign from God, and he said he vowed to become a monk if he survived, and he did. So a few days later, July 17th, he abandoned his study of law and entered an Augustinian monastery. And he lived as a monk, but he didn't abandon his studies. So he continued to study at University of Erfurt and also at a university in Wittenberg for 3 years, from 1507 to 1510. He then took a break for a year to serve as a representative in Rome for the German Augustine monasteries. And a year later, he received his doctorate and became a professor of biblical studies. So over the course of the next 5 years, he continued theological studies that led him to the statements and 95 Theses and stuff like that he made later on. So without his instincts and his face of death, he would have been stuck with law school, and he wouldn't have discussed or discovered the corrupt system of the church and got like this whole ball rolling essentially. So that's where the lightning strike comes from, because that's where it basically all started. So then the true like core of Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation starts with his 95 Theses. So the quote reads, Christians are to be taught that if the Pope knew the exaction of the indulgences preachers, he would rather that than the Basilica of St. Peter were burned to ashes than built up with the skin, flesh, and bones of his sheep. So this will be explained in a minute, because we have to start with how Luther got into all of this. He started to study the work of Augustine, which was like really, really old, but he noticed that he shared the same ideas as him, that the importance of the Bible rather than the church officials themselves, and that how he kind of realized that the church was kind of making it their own, in the sense that wasn't exactly what was coming directly from the Bible. He also believed that humans could not reach salvation by their own acts, and that God could only bestow salvation with his divine grace. So Luther was taking this as the foundation of the Protestant Reformation, and while this was happening, the church, the Catholic Church, was being very shady and increasing its corruptness, basically. So they were granting indulgences, which we learned, and they were providing absolution for sinners, which essentially means that they're paying off their sins, and this would ensure they were welcomed into the heavens in the afterlife. And the problem with this was that the purpose behind these indulgences was not to better the people or to like teach them a lesson and make them learn from their mistakes, but it was just to raise money to renovate St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. So it's basically just a big fundraiser, like based on a lie, because they weren't really paying off their sins. They were just doing something wrong and then like giving money. It wasn't coming from like God and like the higher power. So in response to this like absurdity and craziness, Luther wrote The Disruption on the Power of Efficacy of Indulgences, which is the 95 Theses. That's like its full name. So on October 31st, 1517, Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church, and these theses became the base of the Protestant Reformation. Now, what's important about these theses is that they were written in a humble tone, and there was no like accusing or like, it was calling out the church, but it was more questioning them. It wasn't like making accusations that they were awful and terrible. It was respectful in a sense. So the first two theses were Luther's central beliefs about gaining salvation through faith and not indulgences, while the remaining 93 supported all of this. And then he references St. Peter's mishap with these theses, with the quote that I said earlier, which is basically saying that the believers of Christianity were taught and kind of like blinded by the fact that the Pope is supposed to be like an extension of God, and like the Pope is not going to do anything wrong. He's like the epitome of faith and Christianity, so he would be the last to ever support, and he would burn down St. Peter's if he knew this was happening, but in reality he was supporting this. So this was just kind of like jarring for Luther. So these theses posted on the door of the church were somehow spread throughout Germany and then in Rome, and this was with the help of the printing press. So basically without the printing press, like, this might have not gotten around and like had such a ripple effect. So with theses being spread to people other than just the church and within Germany, because now it was making its way to Rome, which is a big deal because Rome is like Catholic Church central. So it allowed the public to form their own opinions and see what was really happening that the church kept hidden, which was very important for Luther's overall impact of... Why won't it let me pause? I need a break. Okay, so up on the slide, along with the quote, is the 95 Theses, which is really difficult to read, but it's also in German, so we couldn't read it anyways. And then a little like shot of Luther hanging them up on the door. Obviously, that is not a real picture, but you get the idea. Also, since there are no words on our slides, where the sources came from match like the works cited in the corner. See, source 2 and 5, that's where this information is from. So, next part. Okay, so next in our timeline is the counterattack. So this was basically the church's response to Luther's theses. So they were widespread, like they were going around everywhere. And the church was previously seen as the highest power, and the people were now losing trust in that, and they were kind of questioning it, and the Pope was trying to gain control back by excommunicating Luther and saying he's a heretic and such. So he was planning a case to issue a papal bull, which is an official document that is issued by the Pope. But with Luther's increasing popularity as the man who challenged the Pope, the church was having difficulty taking him down, but wanted to do it as quickly as possible. So they issued the 1520 bull, but it was weak in an argument against Luther, and it lacked a real reason for condemning him. It didn't really have like anything that could be used as an argument against him, and Luther also knew that, so he burned it, and he was like, this has no meaning, and that's why he's doing that picture. He's burning it because he's like, I didn't do anything wrong, I just stated what was going on. And they gave him 120 days to recant in Rome, and he refused to do that also. So him burning it and making bold statements and stuff escalated his popularity, and the church did not like this because people were starting to kind of follow in his footsteps. So he was excommunicated from the church on January 3rd, 1521 by the second bull that he was given. And this basically means that he was officially excluded from participating in the sacraments and services of the Catholic Church. So he could not consider himself a member of the church anymore. He was not a part of it, which is sad, but it started a revolution or a reformation. He had to take some sacrifices. So this led others to kind of start to form their own opinions. And then he also, in April, showed up at the Diet of Worms, and it was which is a meeting of the Holy Roman Empire. And there he defended his work and declared himself a Christian outside the authority of the Catholic Church. So basically he's a different branch, he's separate from it. And then others started to do that as well. So basically, in the events of the church trying to silence and excommunicate Luther, they ended up giving the movement more reason and sparked many common people to extend into other beliefs within Catholicism. I don't know if that's how you say that, but the next part of our timeline is his further spread to the people. So Luther now wanted the common people to be able to read and interpret the Bible without the interference of the church officials. So he decided to translate the New Testament in the late months of 1521 in the Wartburg Castle. And this took him 11 weeks to complete with the help of Philip Melanchthon. I don't know if that was right. And while he was hiding, because he kind of got himself into a lot of trouble by making all these statements and, kind of going against the church, who was seen as the untouchable at the time. So he said, I will remain hidden here until Easter. In the meantime, I intend to translate the New Testament into the language of the people. Our friends demand it. I hear that you engage in the same task. Continue as you have begun. Oh, that every single city had its own translator, and that this book, meaning the Bible, were translated into all languages by hands, eyes, ears, and hearts. So he's basically encouraging others to translate and spread and share the words of God that he intended for the people to hear, rather than what the church has made their own. And Luther just wants everybody to understand. That's his main goal. So, and he got it, because about 200,000 copies were sold within the next 12 years. And this is pretty remarkable for the time, because they didn't have the kind of technology that we have today, obviously. So his translation also caused a chain reaction and led to other languages like Dutch, English, and French to make their translations. So again, this was through the help of the printing press. and Luther's translation was spread to people so low in the social class that even shoemakers, tailors, and women had access, and they read, studied, understood, and used it as their belief system now, rather than just the words of the Pope or official church. So Luther's translation of just the New Testament alone, not even the entirety of the Bible yet, had already spread to so many people and allowed the Protestant Reformation to grow. So he was pretty impactful in these four main focal points of his life. I'm sorry that was so long. Now it's McKenna's time.
Luther's impact in the world was his writing and the way that he could spread his ideas. So this happened specifically with the translation of the Bible. Previously, the Old Testament was in Hebrew and the New Testament was in ancient Greek. So many people couldn't understand it, and therefore they had to listen to the Pope or the religious officials in order to understand what their religion was. And that left the Pope and the officials with a lot of power to make up different things that were in the Bible that weren't actually there. So he started in 1517 and he was fully complete by 1534. The New Testament was translated when he was hiding in Wartburg after being declared an outlaw. This was because they said he was spreading misinformation after the 95 Theses were published. So he had to be very educated on all three languages because he was translating Hebrew, he was translating ancient Greek, and he was translating these into German. But he didn't do this by himself. He worked with a team of translators, Caspar Cruciger, Justus Jonas, and Matthias Arugalis. Sorry if I just butchered their names, guys. And he ran into issues with comprehension because the languages weren't exactly lining up. There were three very different languages. So he worked to make the Bible understandable as well as trying to keep it with the same values as the original copy. But his overall goal was just for the people to be able to understand what they were reading and be able to interpret the text in their own personal ways, because the church was had the ability for a lot of corruption, as they in the indulgences they were told them that it was in the Bible and that they needed to pay in order to get into heaven. But again, this was not something that was in the Bible. This was not something that the Bible valued, and he wanted to make sure that that wasn't ever going to happen again. So he wanted people to be able to comprehend the text in their own way. So in 1546, 500,000 copies of the entire Bible that he translated circulated the world in, well, not the world, circulated in 93 cities, and the average price was 2 florins. But later, the Bible became worldwide as people started spreading information more and more. So the translated Bible started the Reformation movement along with the 95 Theses because the people could understand the text in their own way. They can see that how much the church was manipulating them and the ways of which the indulgences and just trying to make them believe things that weren't accurate. But today, the Bible is translated into hundreds of languages worldwide because so now everyone has the ability to read it and form their own opinions and values based on it. And Luther's version has been revised today, the German version that he's created, but they kept the same values that he's expressed in the theology that he mentioned in his copy, but they just improved the language to make it a little bit more accurate. But his was very accurate and very impressive for his time. So his writing impacted religion today because it's really important for scriptures to be translated so everyone can understand them, or else, again, like the religious authorities are just going to be able to tell you what to think instead of determining your own faith and comprehending the actual religion you believe in. So these are the impacts that Luther created by his writing and just existing in general. So his spread of information led to the Protestant Reformation, specifically like the publishing of the 95 Theses, which is basically, so the group of Catholics were against the abuse of power that the church had conducted, and they created a split in Catholicism, and a new branch was formed called Protestantism. And it basically was all the branches that were like, we hate the Roman Catholic Church. And it was all of them, and they were just grouping together. So This paved the way for people to challenge the system of Christianity. This happened several times with John Calvin in France, Huldrych Zwingli in Switzerland, and they wanted to change the practice of the Holy Communion, and a group called the Anabaptists wanted to bring about a new way of baptism. So the Protestants also believed that the Pope should have significantly less power in the church because he basically saw himself as like a god on earth, and that just was not how the Bible interpreted it. And he abused his power and control, and they just didn't believe that that was fair. Instead, they believe that you should rely on God and the Bible for spiritual wisdom, and you should take your own personal responsibility for your own faith beliefs. So researching the Bible and doing all those things instead of listening to what the authorities are telling you. So this then led to several government officials rejecting the ideas of the Pope, and they instead instilled Protestant values within their governments. And then more branches of Christianity were formed, as the people who wanted to leave the jurisdiction of England's royalty were then known as English Separationist church members, and those who stayed were Puritans. And this impacted religion as they held many of the same values, but they were different branches, whether because they didn't agree on some specific thing or because they weren't as strict. And now there's a lot of branches of Catholicism depending on these different beliefs. He's a major influential figure of his time, Luther is, because of the chain reaction that he made to religion today. So now people can kind of find a community within the specific beliefs that they have within their religion. And pictured here on my screen is the symbol of the Protestantisms, and the symbol of the Catholic Church, as you will know, is the cross. So Luther, in my opinion, also kind of started the scientific revolution in a way. Not started it, but kind of made it happen quicker. So this is actually a very huge debate within scientists and historians today. And I found that within my research, a lot of people either very much agree with it or very much disagree with it. I would agree with it because, and the way I see it is, when Luther started the Protestant Reformation, the scientific revolution also kind of began, because the church had so much power at one point, they were preventing scientists from sharing their discoveries if it would contradict with the ideas of the Bible in any way. We saw this with Galileo when he was trying to tell everyone about his discoveries in astronomy, and they said that it wasn't within the church's values, and they basically threatened him if he didn't lie to the public. So Protestantism kind of led to more of a fixation on reality of things rather than what religious authorities were telling them, and they stopped relying on those authorities as much. So then this kind of gave scientists the freedom to share their ideas and kind of express things that they were previously going to be incriminated for doing. So the defiance of Catholicism also started the opposing of their anti-science beliefs, and in a way the scientific revolution also kind of helped Luther's cause as well. So the printing press, as pictured on my screen, helped share the 95 Theses and helped share the Bible that he translated, so everyone could kind of join in his cause and learn more about their religion. He was also respected by the Protestants as he created he didn't create the religion, but he kind of created the ideas of opposing the Roman Catholic Church and kind of bringing to light the things that they had done. And he had very strong beliefs in scientific, mechanical, medical advancements, and he kind of made society more open to these ideas as people were joining in his movement, and he greatly supported those discoveries. So I think it still would have occurred without him, the scientific revolution in general, but I think his involvement in the opposition of the church kind of made these things happen quicker and made the people able to see the discoveries being made, because if the church continuously still had power, then they would prevent the scientists from sharing their discoveries that they made if it opposed the Bible. So although science has improved tremendously, and today it's improved tremendously, and it's making our lives easier and safer, and this is all through the knowledge that we have gained over thousands and thousands of years, and that is due to Luther in a way. Another one of Luther's impacts was, on a very sad note, the 30 Years' War, because it had to do with the religious differences. So it did last 30 years, lasted from 1618 to 1648, and it was between the Catholics and the Protestants. So at this time, religious freedom had been granted in the Peace of Augsburg, but Emperor Ferdinand II basically tried to gain control over the Holy Roman Empire and wanted everyone to convert back to Roman Catholicism. So he tried to bring back the ideas that were had before the Protestant Reformation. And this made people very angry, as they had already been told that they would have religious freedom, and they were told that they could oppose the church in some sort of way. And they had been doing that for many years at this point. And they also were subject to manipulation before. So being told to go back to that previous religion obviously enraged a lot of people. So in the end, many other countries became involved in both sides of war, like if they agreed with either one of their causes. And Luther caused this war because of his development in the Protestants and his belief in them going against the church. So if they hadn't existed, then there wouldn't have been a war, because they would have all been Roman Catholic anyway. The war was one of the longest and most brutal fights in history, with 8 million casualties. And Luther's encouragement to oppose Catholicism created religious tensions in a way, as many people started having very different opinions on the Bible and how Catholicism should be represented. So that also caused some problems. So overall, Martin Luther was a very influential person of his time because of his impact and how he continues to have impact to this day through kind of a chain reaction, because his changes in religion and his writing just made a really, really big impact in unforeseen ways today. Thanks for listening.